It is Graham here, living the dream in 2022, and you're watching part 5, which I'm sorry to say is the last episode in our Cheeky Weekend mini-series. In this episode, follow Fiona, Donna, Michael and I as we make our way back to Scotland from Moraira in Spain. In the last episode of this Cheeky Weekend mini-series, you left Fiona, Donna, Michael, Gaynor and I enjoying a very special birthday lunch for Donna on her significant and very special birthday. After lunch, with still some time to kill, we headed to a little cafe for some decent coffee. And then, with Michael Jr. alias Michael back in the control of his own car, we'd all squeezed into the little VW for our journey back to Alicante Airport. As we headed south along the motorway towards Alicante, dusk was being taken over by night. So I switched over to the iPhone to take this video as we headed south on the motorway, because I wanted to capture on the way back to the airport the two major tunnels that you travel through en route. And the second tunnel on the outskirts of Alicante was a lot longer than the first one, so I'm going to speed up the video as we pass through. And as we reached the outskirts of Alicante on the western bypass, we knew we were approaching the airport. So if young Michael, alias Michael, is ever watching this video, I just want to pass on my thanks to him for loaning his VW to his dad and giving us all transport during this cheeky weekend. And as you can see, we're now approaching Alicante Airport. For a regional Spanish airport, I think this terminal at Alicante is pretty impressive. And while it's still only a single runway airport, would blow any and probably all UK regional airports to shame. The openness give the airport a very airy feel, and the marble effect flooring just gave the airport terminal a clean, modern and quality feel about it. All four of us had already printed our boarding passes and we were carrying hand luggage only, so there was no check-in required. And that meant all we had to do was find the security line and go airside. And once through security and we were airside, yes guys, we had no option but to walk through duty free. Those of you who watch the channel regularly will know this is a pet hate of mine. I absolutely hate being forced to walk through a store I don't want to shop in. after what seemed like an age walking through that duty-free shop, we entered the main terminal airside. And of course, because we were flying Ryanair, we had no access to a fancy business class premium lounge on this service between Alicante and Prestwick. So sitting next to the gate, all we had to do was to wait on our flight appearing on the gate departure board. And then, in what seems like a tradition flying on board any low-cost airline, we were about to be moved from queue to queue or line to line. We actually thought we had been sitting next to our gate, but of course flying to the UK, we're no longer in Europe, but we were never in the Schengen region, so we had to go back through passport control. And for Fiona and I travelling on British passports, that meant that our passports had to be stamped with an exit stamp from Spain. So with that all completed, we were through passport control and heading to seats which we hoped were beside the departure gate this time. So you know when you book priority boarding, you think you're probably in a little bit more of an exclusive line. Guys, not with Ryanair. The downside with Ryanair is that everyone who books a cabin bag gets priority boarding, and as no one wants to book hold bags these days, everyone is in the priority line, making the absolute normal line for everyone else actually more exclusive. But you know guys, give Ryanair their due, the flight was definitely going out on time tonight. And when I checked out Flight Radar over the last 6 months, the punctuality of this flight between Alicante and Prestwick was 100%. And it is very reassuring to see the number 1 engine get such a thorough pre-flight. So on board the Ryanair 737 in seats 3A and 3B, Fiona and I were now sitting comfortably ready for our flight back to Prestwick in Scotland, trying not to think about the cold and miserable weather that we would arrive into, but little did we know. So jumping over to Flight Radar 24, we'll be departing Alicante on runway 10, which was the same runway we landed on Friday. Shortly after takeoff, we'll be making a number of left-hand turns, heading in a northwesterly direction over the Spanish mainland, skirting the north of Madrid in the direction of Santander, where we would cross the Bay of Biscay, overhead the Brest Peninsula, then crossing the English Channel, overhead the tip of Land's End, before skirting up the east coast of Ireland, where I would have an absolutely beautiful view of Dublin. Our arrival into Prestwick would be on runway 30, in the midst of Storm Frances, but more about that later on in the video. As I've stated on my videos many times before, departing at night makes for taking pretty poor video. The scenery in this part of Spain is absolutely stunning, and if you go back to part 1 of this Cheeky Weekend mini-series, you will see great footage of our approach into Alicante on Friday. Our onboard experience on this Ryanair up to Prestwick tonight was pretty poor. Not only was there no tea or coffee, bearing in mind we'd pre-ordered a snack pack on tonight's flight, so after asking the senior cabin attendant if we could replace the coffee and tea with a Coca-Cola and a Sprite, the look in her face would have told you that Ryanair were going to make a loss on tonight's flight just because we had asked to change our tea and coffee, which they didn't have, for a Coke and a Sprite. The girl was clearly having a bad day. And it would have also been nice if Ryanair had dimmed the cabin lights for the majority of this nighttime flight. So all in all, it was a pretty uncomfortable and unhappy flight up to Prestwick tonight. But the best, or maybe the worst, was still to come, landing on runway 30 in Storm Frances. guy sitting behind us in row 4 was clearly a very nervous flyer because he never shut up the entire approach into Prestwick tonight. But this video in the dark didn't give that landing justice at all. It was pretty blustery the whole way down to the runway. In fact, the wind was so strong tonight they weren't parking the aircraft nose into the terminal like they normally would. So we were about to be positioned nose into wind. It feels as if I've cheated a little bit and brought that video to an end rather abruptly, but there is a little bit of a story behind it. So the first thing to say, it didn't come over very well in the video, but we landed back in Prestwick on that Sunday night at just before midnight in horrendous weather. I think it was Storm Francis that was pounding Scotland at the time. The winds were 75 to 80 miles an hour, so all praise to the captain of that Ryanair 737 for doing such a fantastic job at getting the bird on the ground in Prestwick. But the fun didn't stop there because they started to let the passengers off the aircraft. Fiona and I were in row 3 seats, 3A and 3B. And I think just after I got off the stairs at the front of the aircraft, something happened and the stairs broke loose, breaking the front left-hand door of the Ryanair Boeing 737. The result was that all of the other passengers were held on the aircraft for nearly an hour until the authorities at Prestwick Airport found an alternative route to get the rest of the passengers off the aircraft. Fiona and I could barely stand up, never mind drag our cases from the aircraft to the terminal building at Prestwick Airport, so I'm afraid, guys, I didn't film it. It would probably have made quite good video as well. We were actually pulling into our driveway about an hour after leaving the aircraft when Donna and Michael called us to say they were finally getting off the plane themselves, so they weren't home in Glasgow until after 2 a.m. Anyway, that was the last video in our Cheeky Weekend miniseries. I hope you enjoyed it. Fiona and I really enjoyed making it, and we would recommend a Cheeky Weekend in February to the sun for everyone living in the United Kingdom, because it is exactly what the doctor ordered for us, getting away from the misery of a Scottish winter to the relative warm and heat of Spain in February. It was a fantastic, incredible thing to do, and we really enjoyed it, and we think we might do it again. Okay, in about a month's time, I will be publishing our next series, which Fiona has decided to call Two-Step, Two States. And you'd be right in thinking that there is probably going to be a bit of a country and western theme to that video, because for the first time, Fiona and I are going to be visiting Nashville in Tennessee. But before that, we're going to be heading over to Lansing, the capital of Michigan, to visit some friends. So we're going to be heading from Schiphol in Amsterdam across to Detroit on board Delta. We're going to have a week in Michigan before flying down to Nashville in Tennessee, where we're going to enjoy pubs, beer, barbecue and music. What else could anyone ask for? So if you want to follow Fiona and I as we enjoy our travels throughout 2022 and beyond, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and press the bell icon if you wish to be notified when our next video is published. Thanks so much for watching our Cheeky Weekend mini-series, and until the next one, keep living your dream, whatever that is.